listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God!
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, joined today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing the 1987 sci-fi action comedy classic RoboCop, which is a movie that I'm sure all of us watched as children, the complete unrated, the R-rated version. We were far too young.
Yeah.
Because that movie, so when you watched the recent version, was it the uncut version that had all the scenes in it? Or was it the R-rated cut?
Yeah, I believe I have the unrated Blu-ray.
Because that's the one where there's additional gore that's like, blood sprays out more, the initial killing of...
Spoiler, Murphy dies.
The original murder of Murphy is more graphic, like his arm is blown off explicitly, and there's more stuff going on.
I think most of the releases are like that now. But I remember watching this a lot on TV too, like in the mid 2000s after I got like an HGTV, because I think this channel called HD Net. I think they used to show it, but I feel like they showed the unrated version because I think that's the one I watched a lot. But I guess it was like a movie channel, so they could do whatever.
Yeah, I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the Paul Verhoeven classic, RoboCop, that I'm sure had, just to me, that's one of those movies that did have a big effect when I was younger. But you go back and rewatch it now, and it seems more fitting than ever.
Yeah, that's when I watched it again in the mid 2000s. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize this movie was this good. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought when I was younger, you're just like, oh, cool, it's a RoboCop shooting people.
Yeah, when you remember as a kid, it's just kind of like an action-y, like almost kind of like Schwarzenegger Predator type. You just think of it as just like a very one-trick pony, and you go back and watch it. No, this has actually got some depth to it that you wouldn't expect to have a movie called
because
RoboCop.
back in the era too, though, they had the RoboCop like TV series. They had the action figures and toys,
which we had some of.
And then they had like the video games, because there's like the
was there a cartoon too, I believe?
Yeah, I think so.
RoboCop.
And then there was I remember a video game was like Terminator versus RoboCop or something.
That was on Super. There was a RoboCop for NES. I think a couple other like systems of that era.
Yeah, so pretty saturated in culture, and I think looking back, I think there was a trend back then to have R-rated movies, because like Aliens also had a toy line, Terminator and Terminator 2
marketed
had toy lines.
everything, because again, we talked about it before, like they didn't know how to make a kids movie, so they knew how to mark it down.
Because when you think about it, I remember like some of my friends I was growing up had a bunch of Terminator toys, and it's like we had some too,
and Predator and
RoboCop. At least with RoboCop, there was a TV series that was PG or whatever. Yeah. And then the movies, I think, got progressively less.
And they also, too, there was, I think they licensed it to Marvel maybe, but there was a comic book series, and I think Frank Miller helped write the sequel.
Yeah.
And made it more comic booky and colorful.
Yeah, but before we get into discussing RoboCop, we'll briefly go through some things we've been watching, because I don't think there's been much real news to cover.
No. I mean, like, they released another Venom trailer, and, we've talked about this.
I still didn't watch that.
It's one of those things where it's like, I think the more they release of it, the less interesting. Like, at one point, it, like, wasn't enough, then they released enough to pique interest. And then the more they release, it's like, now...
So they had one trailer that was just Tom Hardy running around and narrating it, and it just looked kind of like generic movie. Yeah. And then they had the trailer that showed Venom at the very end of the trailer, so it's like, oh, okay, so they're already giving us a little bit of it. Cool. And then this new trailer is just like CGI fights all over the place with probably unfinished effects. So I think whenever they do that, that can kind of hurt the movie, because if the effects are going to look better in the final product than what they do in this trailer, that could turn some people off. But have you seen the people taking the images of Venom from the trailer and put eyes?
Yeah, the googly eyes.
They put like actual eyes inside like the big white parts of the costume. So that is scarier than anything in this trailer. But it's just one of those things where if you're trying to back your way into a Venom movie, it's like, first off, having a Venom movie with no Spider-Man is like, I don't really get the point there. And having a Venom movie without Carnage, it's like, he could be in this movie, he could be hidden, because Woody Harrelson plays some role that's apparently small and mostly setting up for a sequel. But I don't get why you leave out the two biggest elements of that character in this movie.
The two most popular elements are not going to be in it.
But it's just
they left Joker out of the first Batman Begins.
But I mean, that was though Batman, like, you know, the origin story of Batman, and then they teased Joker at the very end.
I mean, maybe that's exactly what they're doing. Maybe it's going to be a good story about Tom Hardy.
I mean, him being in it gives
who knows? Yeah, who knows?
You know, at least he's going to be enjoyable in it. It's one of those things where it's like I would much rather just, you know, show me what Venom they did, and then just kind of wait on it, because it's like when you release this unfinished stuff, like at this point, I don't care for big CGI fights. And like I know you have other superhero movies this year that had them and they were good, but it's like,
well, too,
there's just something about it where it's like I don't really care to watch two huge things.
What they've essentially guaranteed is that if they give him his entire movie and he's an anti-hero, that it's not very likely that he'll be the sole villain in a Spider-Man film.
Yeah.
So I mean, they could try to eventually do a Maximum Carnage movie with Carnage and Venom and Spider-Man. But at that point, with all those being connected to but like, I don't think the Marvel Cinematic Universe wants R-rated Venom or Carnage attached.
No.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know how that'll work.
I mean, aren't they doing a Kraven?
Yeah,
or
they're
something?
doing a Kraven, which
they want to do a Kraven Hunter, and they want to do one that has Black Cat and Silver Sable. So
no,
like,
they canceled that one.
And who's the vampire
well,
one?
I think Morbius.
Morbius
Jared
one
Leto.
also. Yeah.
See, like the fact that you make a Morbius movie, they like the rights issues. They should have Blade, because that's the only way that makes sense or is worth doing. And
again,
Wesley Snipes could still be Blade.
Yeah, and they could always, if they couldn't get Tom Holland, they literally could get Andrew Garfield to come back and just have
the sides movies.
Do it. I mean, what's going to hurt? You know, it's not. You know,
it's just kind of a mess. But like the other thing though is like if you have Spider-Man fighting Venom and Carnage, and because the big thing that's become a problem with all the Marvel movies at a certain point is, well, why don't other characters step in when it becomes this big deal? The first Spider-Man did a good job of having the Vulture be kind of like a small scale villain that really wouldn't rise to the attention of Iron Man or, you know, Captain America or whoever. It's just, you know, well, Captain America at that point had been hiding because of the Civil War stuff, but it didn't rise to the level that all these other heroes across the world would see it and then want to come get involved. And they did a good job of that. But when you have like the entire city at risk with stuff and characters that are just slaughtering people like Carnage would, then it doesn't make a ton of sense that other people wouldn't want to come and get involved.
What if?
Well, the Sokovia Accords.
Woody Harrelson plays an old Spider-Man, and at the end he puts back on the suit because he realizes he needs to come out of retirement.
come back.
Why not have an old? That's the way you could do it. Like if you had a young Spider-Man recast, it would confuse people. If he was like really old and like, okay, this is still modern day, but it's old, so this is a different timeline. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, so here's the kicker though. At the end of the movie, you see freaking Tobey Maguire.
People would be very excited.
And then, so here's the thing. So here's the movie. The movie is Venom is like fighting this bad guy, and then they're all sitting there, and then you start hearing some fingers snapping, and you look over, and it's Tobey Maguire, and he's like, "Sup, guys?" And then he has his own symbiote, and then he beats them all up. And then
I would
eats.
I'd buy that for dough.
And then he sits there drinking milk, eating cookies as the cops come and arrest him.
Wait a minute.
You know what would be?
No, he had to walk over and just take a page out of Star Wars. There's a cow sitting there, so he just drinks milk right out of the udder and eats a cookie. And
you know what would be? You know, because there was that other film that did like the surprise announcement of like, hey, it's connected to this universe or whatever.
Yeah.
It would be amazing if they did that, teased Tobey Maguire at the end of it. But not only that, Sam Raimi was like sitting next to him, so you knew who was going to direct it. The sequel that would be so awesome. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but yeah, those Spider-Man films are old now.
Yeah, the first one was like what 2000.
Third Spider-Man 2 sequel.
Because there was Spider-Man 1. So there was Spider-Man 2002, Spider-Man in 2004, then Spider-Man 3 in 2007, I think. And then the Amazing Spider-Man was in 2012. Amazing Spider-Man 2 was in like 2014. Then they scrapped it, and then he was in Civil War, and then he was in Spider-Man Homecoming, and then they have Spider-Man Far From Home. And then there's the animated one coming out this year, Spider-Man Into the Verse. So there's like all these versions of this character. So they will, if they get to the third, so this is the third time there's been a second movie in a Spider-Man series. Now, the Andrew Garfield one ended at part 2.
One thing to say about the X-Men movies, they pretty much had the same you know, basis timeline since before that first Spider-Man movie.
Even though the timeline makes absolutely no sense.
They haven't really rebooted it. They did like soft reboots as far as, you know, prequel stuff. But,
like Days of Future
but they've never said, you know, like, hey, this is an all new Wolverine yet. Like, obviously they probably will be now, especially with this merger. What's
funny though is with the X-Men movies, you have James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender in the 90s as Professor X and Magneto, and they're somehow in the course of like 5 years supposed to turn to Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen.
Well, I just wonder if you're Disney and you're getting X-Men, what do you do? Because like Deadpool's still highly successful, so that's the easiest one because he can just make a one quip line, then that's over. You know, because he could literally say, "Oh, Fox, Disney bought us out." Yeah. And then, like with his character, that makes sense. But then with the other stuff, like if you have like Fassbender and McAvoy who are really good in those roles, and maybe some other characters that work well, do you recast them or what do you do with that? You know,
well, I think
I think McAvoy, who likes doing the role, is like a really good actor.
I think what they would probably
desirable. Great. I don't think you want to drop him.
I think what they would probably do is they would first introduce the Fantastic Four because that's kind of dead in the water. So they can easily introduce those as side characters in the Marvel universe, and you know, give them their own movie or just make them part of other movies like they have the Hulk, and then figure out do they want to create the X-Men in the Marvel universe or do some, you know, multi-universe type deal.
I think well, first of all, this is terrible if this happening just because so much is going to be under Disney's roof. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not just like X-Men or whatever.
I mean, I think
terrible, but if it's going to happen, you know, nothing you could do about it. But I think they almost have to do like cross-universe stuff because all of a sudden our X-Men just going to not have a history before this and start popping up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't make much
like
sense.
Wolverine, all that. I was thinking, and two, all it's going to be. It seems like it's going to be, especially in a world with superheroes, it seems like the X-Men would not be like outcast. You know what I mean? Yeah. People are used to people with powers and stuff. So it's like, what is the story there? Because, you know, that first X-Men movie, it was like this thing, you know, it was like parallels to World War II and stuff. So like, what is the actual story there? With those characters, like why do them? What makes them special, especially being a huge cast? I was thinking, you know, because it's going to be a bunch of attractive people in spandex again, basically. You know, it's just more attractive people. Like, are we going to run out of actors to fill these roles? Yeah. You know, as far as face named actors. But I think what I would love for them to do is for the X-Men to be actually like somewhat outcast and be actual mutants and not be attractive and look like mutants.
Well, they made Wolverine look like Wolverine was supposed to. Like
Wolverine. No, I'm talking about like looks like he's like they're all like Toxic Avenger characters, and like they all are like outcasts. So even the superheroes like Tony Stark's like, get away, like from the actual be outcast and be band together. I don't have a connection. That's what I want.
What's the sewer mutants that they used to fight all the time?
Oh, the Morlocks. Whatever.
Yeah, it'd be like the Morlocks.
Yeah. Well, what would be funny though is like on the Marvel Netflix shows, they go out of their ways to not call the superheroes by their names. Like sometimes they'll just directly say like Cap or whatever, but there's other times like, oh yeah, the big green guy and the guy with the hammer and the guy in the suit. But it would be funny is if they also add like the X-Men in, like, yeah, the guy's got the claws, the guy shoots the beams out of his eyes, and then the guy that's like the blue creature, but he's not as powerful as the Hulk.
The guy from New Orleans.
The guy, that Cajun that throws the card, and the girl that can suck your powers out, but not with their mouth, it's just with their hands, or maybe her mouth, I don't know.
So you're kind of using the one guy from Ant-Man to describe everybody.
Well, I just feel like, you know, that's there's already so many movies coming out, Marvel movies a year. Yeah. Like, are you going to be able to fit a whole cast of X-Men? Like, is it going to be just one film with X-Men or multiple ones? Like, and what's going to make them different? I mean, granted, I know they've made a lot of these Marvel films different, but at the same time, some people get a little fatigued. Like, make it really different. Like, I just wish they would go totally left field, do something crazy.
I think it's where you make, at first, what makes sense to me is almost make the X-Men's villains. Because, like, I think what makes sense is, you know, that Charles Xavier, you go with the original core group of X-Men, like the originals, the OGs, the 1960s ones where you have, like
Beast and
you just
Cyclops
go with them,
and Iceman
and Angel and them. And then, essentially, the reason why they haven't been out there yet is because they've been training. So, at some point, you kind of go with the Age of Ultron theory where, like, they see the Avengers as the problem. Like, nothing was a problem until then. Then you have them fight each other.
Or cross universe. Imagine if the new Avengers was Avengers versus X-Men.
Yeah,
imagine.
I'm saying that's the only way I can see this really work. Whereas at first they are fighting each other.
And then it just depends on which X-Men you have and which Avengers you have as to how long that fight lasts.
Yeah, I mean, do you have like the good group of the X-Men, then it probably wouldn't last that long.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't see a clean solution to that. You know what I mean? Just like long term.
The only one that's easy
capacity.
is Deadpool. Because like again, he can just throw like one. He can literally like, oh yeah, Disney bought us. We're part of the Avengers now, and then it's like, oh okay, then. But no, like with all the other stuff, it's very complicated.
And Disney buying the movie arm of Fox of 20th Century.
Aliens are now Disney.
20th Century Fox, like ultimately, I think that was better than when it was Comcast trying to buy it, because I think that content providers, so your cable internet services and cable companies buying the companies that make the movies and shows gives them too much leverage to then say, well, Disney movie, or if they bought Fox. Comcast could make it where Fox, once all the rights deals that pre-exist, have dates into the future, once all those end, the only place to get their content is from if you have a Comcast subscription and a Comcast Xfinity service or whatever it's called. So if they can block it so you have to have certain providers to get certain content, I think that's worse than Disney saying you have to buy the Disney streaming service to get the streaming version of Marvel films.
Isn't that kind of the same thing, though, basically?
Well, Disney, though, will be a service available on any platform. Yeah. They are not the one who owns the means of distribution. They don't own the cable companies that provide the service to you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
If the cable company itself owns it, they can leverage that to hurt competitors that are like Netflix or companies that are platform agnostic that can run any
Still
network.
Terrible all the way around.
Yeah, it's not good, but I think it's better for other content companies to get bigger than for the companies that provide the services to then buy up all the companies and be able to say, because just imagine a world where if you want to watch the newest, X-Men movie or Deadpool movie, you have to have a Comcast subscription. Yeah. And it just geographically, they're not available everywhere. And
I don't. Yeah, it would. That would be very. And that would be a risky move for them, though. You know what I mean? Because they need eyeballs on that stuff for it to be profitable.
Well, I mean, now you have where AT&T bought Time Warner, so they're is HBO eventually going to be focused on people that have Time Warner or AT&T cable internet, and I don't know. So I think all that stuff is tricky, and it's bad that companies are buying other companies. And it's still like unclear. Like maybe it would have been better if Comcast had bought it. I don't know, but at this point, I hope companies stop buying other companies and making it so there's only because Disney's the only one making money really off movies right now. I mean, a lot of companies are making money, but they're the only ones that are making enough money to really shift the industry in any direction.
And too, then they have more power in the industry. Just like the stuff with the critic reviews on some Disney films and stuff. They were kind of flexing their muscle at some critics, and because they had so much power. And it now just gives them more power too. You know what I mean? Just
Mickey Mouse comes in with the baseball bat.
Hi guys. Hi, Mickey. But okay, so we want to get into discussing the things we've been watching.
Yes.
So briefly, I saw Unfriended Dark Web. So
wait a minute. Now is Mr. Bacone on the dark web?
What?
You have no idea what I'm talking about. Never mind. Cal McLaughlin on Portlandia the Mayor.
Okay, some deep cut references to Portlandia.
Does he go to the dark web to order something?
But,
fireworks and
yes, that's right. Yeah.
but Unfriended Dark Web. So this wasn't a movie where I'm just sitting here. It's like, oh, I want to go to the theater and see this over everything that's available. It's just that if you've been following the MoviePass ordeal,
they suck.
MoviePass. So Julie and I bought the year subscriptions back at the beginning of the year, so we have it through the beginning of next year. And it was like $79.99 plus like an $18 processing fee. So, right under $100. But it's unlimited movies you can see with the MoviePass. And the only restrictions are you can't see the same movie more than twice. And you're going to see one movie a day. So we're like, okay, we'll get our money's worth. I mean, I've already seen like 13 movies. So I've obviously got my money's worth back out of it. And Julie's seen at least like 7. So seeing those like on the weekends where it's like $13 a ticket, she's got her money's worth out of it too. But... So MoviePass, we're recording this on August 5th. So, in the past couple weeks, MoviePass, on a Friday night, I think, stopped working. Just didn't work for anything. Or maybe it's Thursday night.
It was a Thursday.
It was a Thursday night that it stopped working.
Yeah.
So they took an overnight, $5 million loan at some ridiculous, 20% interest rate. And then over the weekend, they implemented a new rule that you couldn't see Mission Impossible Fallout with it because it's a new movie. And people do think that it impacted the box office by a few million. They think that, based on all the trends of other movies, it still had the largest dollar amount debut for the series. If you adjust it for inflation, it doesn't. But if MoviePass had been in place, I think they probably would have made another $5 million, $10 million.
They were damn.
because that does move a decent amount of tickets for a lot of those movies. But so MoviePass was out, but then it came back, but then they had changed the rules on it. It didn't work for most theaters and most movies or most screenings. And then now the rules are in place is that for movies that launch on over 1,000 screens, they will have no availability for their first 2 weeks. So when a new blockbuster movie comes out, you can't watch it on MoviePass for 2 weeks. And then there's some movies where there'll be additional peak pricing where you have to pay more to see it. And then there's other things they've done to try to make the service profitable. It's going to go from $10 a month to $15 a month. Like mine's a yearly, so the cost I pay is already paid. Never get my money's worth out of it, so I'm just going to use it. So that's why I couldn't see something like Mission Impossible that I would have preferred to have seen. Instead, just saw Dark Web because it was one of the ones that worked. So I went and saw that. And it's a name-only sequel to the Unfriended from a couple years ago. The one that was about a group of friends that were doing like a Skype chat a year after a classmate committed suicide. And then someone joins their chat room mysteriously and people start killing themselves. So that was connected to this movie in name only. There's nothing that's a through line between them. Because I think initially it was screened at festivals under game night. But then there was that Jason Bateman game night movie that
So
they were like, all right, we're going to see game
Where's
night.
Jason
Wait,
Bateman
what?
at?
This teenage
Yeah.
webcam movie?
So, so the Unfriended Dark Web, the basic scenario is there's a guy that's doing a game night with his friends where they play Cards Against Humanity on Skype or whatever.
Are they actually playing Cards Against Humanity? Or
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
Cards
actually,
Against People.
Yeah, because it was like the bigger, blacker box edition or whatever. So it was like the actual game. And he's using this laptop that he took out of the Lost and Found at the cyber cafe he's been going to because it had been there for a few weeks and he just took it. And then when he's using it, stuff pops up and they find like this hidden file that kind of has snuff films on it. And then he gets a message from somebody that's like offering him like $10 million in Bitcoin to, do something a little bit different this time.
This is totally a 2018 movie.
So, yeah, and then it takes place over the course of like Skype sessions, Facebook Messenger, different like one-off created apps they have for the movie, websites, cryptocurrency sites, and all this stuff. So this one does not have a supernatural element. I mean, like some of the technology that's in it is unrealistic, and might exist, might not exist. Like people that can have like a disruptor or something, so that when they're on a webcam, it just shows like pixelated blocks and doesn't actually show them. Like I'm not sure that actually could exist. But so there's like if anything, just slightly futuristic technology in it, but no supernatural element. And it's the same thing where it all takes place from a laptop screen. There's been a number of movies like that. And I think to the first one, it's not as ridiculous as teens are in haunted Facebook or something. So it's a little bit more plausible. And I saw it because I have the MoviePass. I didn't pay for it out of pocket. I just went and saw it. So it was fine enough from that regard. I would not have wanted to paid to see it. To me, it's one of those things where if you're interested in it, it's like a good wait till it hits Netflix. Because I think these movies are on the laptop screen. I guess you might get something from watching them on the big screen in the theater because there is a difference in the theatrical experience. But to me, these are movies that are better for watching at home.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in it there was no real scare moments. I don't think anybody in the theater, because there was a handful of other people in the theater watching it where I was at. Nobody really seemed to react to anything in any huge way. And there was no real tension because you don't really like the characters that much. And it's only like, oh, do you want this person not to die because they're pretty? So that's really the only thing you know about them. And
is it PG-13?
No, it's R.
Was there anything interesting about the dark web in it? Like, did it like actually teach you anything you didn't know about the dark web, or you know what I mean? Like,
no,
that's a bummer. Because it's such an easy thing to say, ooh, the dark web, but like, it would be interesting to see a really good movie actually about the dark web.
I don't want to spoil the ending of it, but you don't really get to go into the depths of the dark web anymore. It's basically just the setup for the scenario that this character then has to figure out how to navigate and what to do. So
I figured they would like.
So yeah, it's not really like it's not really like a dive into the dark web. It's not the Zodiac.
They're just using the buzzword basically, right?
Yeah, I mean they use a little bit, and they use like cryptocurrency or stuff like that. So they just use the trappings of things you have heard about to tell kind of a mean-spirited story, because the other one was kind of mean-spirited too. Because like horror movies, sometimes they're fun and they're kind of light, and there's people that get killed, but like the Friday the 13th, a lot of those aren't really mean spirited. It's just kind of fun.
Like a machete in the head and you roll down a set of stairs in your wheelchair.
Yeah, so there's ones like that where it's like nothing feels super mean spirited, but then there's ones like the first Unfriended, a guy sticks his hand in like a working blender and something. So these movies just are kind of mean spirited, and then they use these kind of buzzwords. Doesn't really teach you anything about the dark web or about internet culture or anything like that. The characters.
I think that would be interesting. What made me think of it is like, Aaron Sorkin, even if he doesn't know something about something, like he dives into it and like we'll learn about it. So, if you do watch, I'm trying to think of what did he do after Social Network, but before Molly's Game? Oh, like even like Jobs.
Yeah.
Like he didn't know anything about computers really.
Well, that was directed by, because that was the Danny Boyle
But he
one.
wrote it.
Yeah.
Sorkin wrote it.
Because wasn't Fincher attached at some point and then backed out because he didn't do it?
So like, he learned a lot about that. Basically, he does a lot of research, and then it's like you learn a lot about even just how these people work. You know what I mean? Even if they aren't like breaking stuff down, you feel like they are knowledgeable about it, and then through that, you're kind of getting that sensation at least.
Like the very end of it, like hints at more stuff going on, but you don't really get to see that. So,
basically, the filmmakers probably didn't really know shit about the dark web.
Or, they may have learned about it, but didn't really dive into how it works in any way. They just kind of showed like the end result of what it basically just like the conspiracy theories that your grandma, your aunt, or whoever on Facebook believes happens is what this movie is. And the dark
pizza place.
The deep state dark web is doing this, and there's a group of people like in life in general. If you think that there is a group of people that have all these hidden agendas and are controlling and pushing things and doing all that, even if they're doing terrible things, I think it's comforting to know that there's some plan to the bad that goes on in the world. Like to think that everything is planned out and there's groups controlling things. That is somewhat of a more comforting idea than just the world is random and chaotic and bad. And there's no reason that some of this stuff happens, and there's not an overarching guide or group that's controlling anything. It's just bad stuff happens and people are crazy and terrible. But overall, it's like a movie. If you catch it on this is something that if you really want to see it, like watching it on Netflix or rental or at home is probably better. And then so I also watched briefly this other movie because I just read about it, reading about dark web that had Elijah Wood in it, called Open Windows. That was from a few years ago, and I think it was made around the same time as the first Unfriended, and it just didn't really get the same push because Unfriended kind of beat it out. Not beat it out. It was directed by Nacho Vigalondo, who did Time Crimes.
Cool.
So that was why I watched it. It has Elijah Wood, and it had Sasha Grey, the adult film star, was in it. And this was a movie where it was all from a laptop screen too, but the technology was a lot less realistic. It was just like made up apps and all these different things. And it's very clearly shot around budget limitations because there are shots where they literally just shot the bare minimum to establish that this is what was happening. And it's like Elijah Wood's in a car and they just have like police lights, which are probably just LED lights flashing outside the car. And like so it's just, that one wasn't as good. It was the concept of like a thriller, but the technology was so false. Because I think in these movies that are all from a laptop screen, if you use real applications like Skype and Facebook and email and stuff,
it matters.
Then it's more establishes you in the world of like, okay, I use all these apps in my real life. This rings true to how I use a computer. But when it's all fake apps and there's like goofy hackers that are French that are talking to you on video chat and stuff, then it loses a lot of that grounding and realism. And even if the concept is better, it just takes you out of it because you're like, what is this chat app? This is not real. This website isn't real. This is dumb. So I think these types of on the computer screen movies, there's more of them coming out because I saw the trailer for the one called Searching that has John Cho in it. About his daughter goes missing.
Oh, yeah. It didn't look too bad, actually.
So that one's making good buzz. And there's another one, I forgot what it's called, that is about like a journalist posing to be recruited by ISIS and talking to that's supposed to be interesting. I just think all these laptop screen movies, it's a cheap way to get into making a film and making an interesting film or trying to. Because the guy that that produced the Unfriended movies was the director of Wanted and like that series of films. Because who was it?
Is Wanted the curved
Tamir
bullet movie?
Bekmambetov. Okay. Yeah, so the curved bullet James McAvoy movie. So for whatever reason, this guy decided he wanted to start producing movies about social media and the internet and using these laptop screen capture things. So there's like software they've made where you can make like a feature film for like $1 million budget. Because he was saying like for trying to make a feature film, you know, young filmmakers, they don't have the money to make something that competes with a Marvel movie or even like something like Wanted that he made. He's like, if you have these movies that are based on these kind of like computer experiences, that's a lot more attainable for first-time filmmakers, which I like that idea. But in practice, I don't know how many of these movies there can be.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them, so I'm not disparaging them. Just from the outside, they don't appeal to me. You know what I mean? Like, I just haven't felt the need to go out and watch them. So, yeah, I don't see that appealing to all young filmmakers. But it's a cool thing if he's wanting to kind of foster that creativity and help those filmmakers make something.
So I like the idea of kind of trying to make an entry-level point that's easier for people to break in. I just don't know what the audience's tolerance is for how many of these movies that are from a computer screen. And like I said, I think the second you start using a bunch of fake applications or social networking sites, because was it Law & Order SVU has like Face Union instead of Facebook and all these things. Once you start introducing a bunch of those, I think you just lose people because... you know, in real movies, if you set something like in RoboCop, the futuristic Detroit, but it's just for Tauruses and stuff, if you ground the world enough and, you know, give it a texture and a feel, people will buy it. But if it's all on a computer screen, I think it's really hard to do that. But yeah, I watched that. And then Castle Rock, have you caught up to the newest episode?
I've only seen the first episode still.
Okay.
We've had time to watch one other show, and we caught up on Sharp Objects.
Yeah, because I watched, me and Julie and I watched the first 4 episodes of Castle Rock because it's on Hulu and there's 4 episodes now. And it has some references to Stephen King stuff because I've seen references in it to some other movies. I think what they said, the show is anthology. So each season, if they make multiple seasons, will all be a different self-contained story. And they're all not based on Stephen King books. They're all original stories in the city of Castle Rock or whatever. And they will only reference events from Stephen King books. Because like there's like news clippings and characters and stuff that are mentioned that reference other stories, but the show itself is about original characters and story arcs.
Spoiler: they're at Shawshank Prison.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Shawshank Prison. Yeah, I mean,
part of it.
I just want to see Tom Jane come in from
the Shawshank Prison too. From my memory, it looks pretty like the office they show.
Yeah,
I feel like it looks in my memory close to the office from the film, The Shawshank Redemption, which was kind of cool. You know, it's especially that's not traditionally a horror film at all.
Yeah.
It's a drama, but it's, you know, it's a very important part of his
catalog.
Yeah, catalog.
So far, like I've enjoyed the show. Like to me, it's not a mystery show that catches you with the hook the same way something like Lost did, you know, back then, or a lot of HBO stuff. It doesn't really have the thing that like the first episode made me want to just immediately watch the next ones. I just knew they were on Hulu, so we just kept watching. So I've enjoyed it. So far, it's not like my favorite show based on what I've seen, but it's something I'm definitely going to keep watching because it is interesting and entertaining.
The first episode was cool.
And it has a really good cast.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, I'm interested to see where it goes because it sets up some mysteries and has Bill Skarsgård in it who played Pennywise.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of actors from
Jane Levy's in it, who was in the Evil Dead remake and stuff.
Stephen King movie.
And then, so I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm enjoying it. Like right now, it's not like in my top like 5 shows on TV, but you know, just continue. I would definitely want to continue watching it and see where it goes.
The lawyer's mom is Carrie. What's Carrie's name?
Oh, Sissy Spacek.
Yeah, Sissy Spacek. There's like tons of like little people and just little touches.
There's little people like
if you
action
watch
figure
it, Derek,
size.
I've not watched
you will
it.
probably enjoy it. Just, you know, being a Stephen King fan, like it's just.
I've heard a lot about it.
It's actually like a shot-for-shot remake of Cujo, but it's spread out over 13 episodes, so it's 13
And
hours.
Cujo hasn't even been born yet.
No.
We go from like birth to
yeah. Then it's them just sitting in the car for 4 episodes while the dog jumps on the window and they cry. But so that was all stuff I had a chance to watch.
The main thing I want to talk about is I saw Mission Impossible Fallout this weekend. And you know, I think y'all talked about it a little bit in the last podcast, so I'm not going to do a big oversight on or whatever, but I will say as far as like movies that have came out this year, I think it's probably the best. Like as far as like action goes, Because you give me something.
Oh yeah, I would think. Okay, if you say action movies, I don't
it's
see.
not the best.
I think
overall,
I've seen most action films, but yeah, this is
hands down the best. I mean, this is even including like the superhero movies.
Because this isn't motion capture CG Thanos fighting CG Iron Man. This is Tom Cruise jumping off stuff and flying off things.
And too, not even that, just the drama built in the story of the action sequences.
Well,
you know what I mean? It's not just a Matrix fight scene, which I loved, but you know, and those do tell stories within each scene. The good ones do. Yeah. But like, it is like so well done as far as the stakes and what he has to do oftentimes and what he's forced to do. Because he's always that character who doesn't really want to be doing these things. He's just, he has to do it to get the job done, you know, and that's what's great about it.
I think me and Sean were talking about this before the podcast, and it's not like a direct fair comparison, but the only thing that I've experienced lately that reminds me of this film is Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain, only in the aspect that like it's constantly moving, and there's like I don't know if I've seen a movie like this that was a big, because like the story, while there is story in it, it's not. It's all the set pieces. It's all the action parts that tell the actual.
Well, it sounds
story.
like the story is just enough to kind of set up what's going on and give you some stakes, but there's not a super involved storyline.
But it's still a really good story.
Yeah, and
it's not like the story takes a back seat to the action, because it doesn't. It's just that like. They've in this movie, you know how like Baby Driver, like a lot of it was set around the musical elements to it. Like that's what kind of drove that movie and made it what it was.
Yeah.
Like this movie, what makes it, and that still told stories, and you still had stuff that happened during that. Like this does that with that. Like I never thought that you would have a helicopter chase scene in a movie that was as badass as this one, because like you say that, and it's like you've seen it in the trailer. Mm-hmm. You have a scene where they're chasing each other in a helicopter and shooting guns at each other. It sounds ridiculous, but in the movie, it's actually really awesome.
He apparently too. So they worked with Airbus on this, who is, you know, Airbus helped them do the stunt from the last one when he's hanging on the side of the plane. Yeah. They said they called him up and they were like, "Oh God, no, not again!" You know, because they had to convince them to do it last time, because they're like, "No, that's impossible. You can't do that." Yeah. And they, of course, they start figuring it out. And so for this. They wanted, of course, Tom Cruise to fly the helicopter.
Yeah, didn't you learn how to fly one?
Yeah, and they said, you know, how long does it take? I'm like, well, it takes three months. And they said, well, we wanted Tom Cruise like, can I get it done faster? And he's like, well, 3 months is going 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. He's like, well, what are you doing the rest of the time? And so basically, they brought in 2 crews that worked 8 hours each with him. And then he would like study and sleep during the other 8 hours of the day, like take naps, they said. I'm sure he slept more than that. Yeah. But essentially he got it done. I don't know how, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, you know, weeks earlier than it would have normally takes a normal person to do it. And apparently like there's a stunt in there with the helicopter, and Airbus was like, no, before they did, you can't do it. He took him up there, convinced him, showed him. He's like, okay, like these, like even like seasoned people, it's a dangerous thing to do. You know what I mean? Like it's just incredible.
Well, I think that's what makes the movie so awesome. Is like when you watch it, like you almost feel stressed out watching Tom Cruise do everything, because you know that's him.
So
doing
what if the next Mission Impossible movie is set in the, you know, it's a real world movie where they're getting ready to start shooting Mission Impossible, and someone actually like commits a crime or kidnaps somebody, and Tom Cruise, it's just a documentary of him getting them back, like going and fighting, beat people up, flying the helicopter, jumping a motorcycle.
I mean, everything he's trained for his entire life, he's using all these skills. That would be a good like Last Action Hero type Tom Cruise movie. You know,
he's like, you know, because like the whole argument, everyone's like, oh, Batman could beat anybody if he doesn't have training. It's like, well, Tom Cruise has been training his entire life for this.
or the thing for Mortal Kombat when everybody like got on Johnny Cage saying, "Oh, he's not really a good fighter." Yeah. You know what I mean?
Tom Cruise can't stop like ISIS.
Like, I told William last time, I think this is my favorite film of the year. Like I was like, we were trying to like, what's some other good ones? I've heard Sorry to Bother You is amazing, but
I want to see that.
I was like, I don't think anything compares to this as far as my favorite film. And honestly, that's how I felt the year Mad Max Fury Road came out, which I love that film, and I think I'd probably maybe lean that way more. I don't know. But like, I feel like nobody was talking about Rogue Nation. And I was like, dude, Rogue Nation was pretty much just as good as Fury Road. It's a way different type of film, though.
I think the only problem I had with Rogue Nation, because I watched 5, 6, and before. I've seen all of them. I just happened to watch 5 on FX, and I've rented 6 just to see before this. And the only problem I had with Rogue Nation is that one felt a little rushed to me. Like, there's just some stuff in the movie that just felt like, I don't know, because like a lot of the Jeremy, which this movie did kind of miss Jeremy Renner a little bit. I would have been nice to have him in it, but I don't know if you needed him after it was all, I don't know if it would have fit into it. But it's like Rogue Nation felt a little rushed, like a little cheesy on some stuff, but other than that, like it was still really good. I still think my favorite is Ghost Protocol of the series. That's my favorite. But Fallout was just like, I don't know if I've seen another action movie that can compare to that. Just because I've never seen one that's like, it's full throttle all the time, and it was always good. It wasn't like like every action sequence was better than the previous, but they're all very good. And there's just a little bit to it. Like you have, and there was some CG in the movie, obviously, but it wasn't heavily relying on that.
Apparently, too, they said they didn't even get to finish a couple shots. So the DVD or Blu-ray will have a few more extra shots, but he's like, people won't really notice it, or maybe it was finishing stuff. I don't know, but he acted like there'd be like some slight changes to that because they were so rushed. When they were like finalizing the film, they realized, oh shit, we missed this shot. They missed this shot, this shot, and this shot, and they just had to take them out because it literally got finished right before the premiere, like, you know, a day before, hours before or something.
Yeah, I would say like, you know, I knew the movie's gonna be good, but you go in there and you watch it, and it just.
I mean, it's a good summer blockbuster film.
It's what to me, like personally, I think this like kicks the shit out of Avengers: Infinity War, and because I'd much rather see movies like this with good hand-to-hand fighting, good set pieces. You know, like, and one thing I liked about this movie that a lot of movies have trouble doing, and Deadpool kind of did this, but it wasn't like, even though this movie was like huge world impacting scales, it never felt that way because the way they set it up, it's always about like. Is a more personal. It's always the personal stories.
It's all about the team.
Yeah, it's not about and not that the world doesn't matter. Because it does matter, but it's like it's more.
So you're saying
personal.
there's not a fight scene where they're trying to keep a vial from falling into a crowd of people below him. People cheer when the good guy wins.
Yeah, no, there's not. Yeah, because nobody knows who he is.
I love the Avengers. The Avengers movies, and a lot of those almost seem like big action soap operas. Yeah, you know, and that's the fun out of them. They're like soap operas. That's the fun part. All these stories, and it's like you're trying to keep track. There's not much to keep track of. It is like a pure action film. He was talking about the way he made Rogue Nation 2 was they had like a rough outline. I think they might have had more of a script then. I don't know. But anyway, of course, they didn't even have the end of that film when they shot it. They were leading up to it. They're like, I don't know what we're going to do. They're like, we don't have the money to make a big set piece for the end. So the end of that movie, you know, originally the airplane was going to be towards the end of the movie, but then they're like, let's move it towards the front, get it out of the way. And then so they were like, yeah, we just basically built this thing out of Home Depot parts, you know, for the end of the film. And they didn't, you know, so for this one too, they think they had an outline, and this, you know, studio's like, okay, go ahead. And he said, even this time, the locations people, and they'd be like, okay, where's the next scene going to take place? He's like, I don't know. Find me a good location. And I'm like, well, we need to know, is it going to be a chase scene? He's like, I don't know, just find me a cool location. And then so they would find him a good location if he liked the way it looked visually and he thought they could do some good stuff, then he would write a scene around it. Yeah. And literally they were like flying by the seat of the pants through the whole movie.
Which makes it even more awesome to see.
Yeah, and it's like, and because, you know, it wasn't just like, he didn't want to box himself into saying, I want it, like every time he said he would box himself in, you know, they might have a crappy location they will give them. Not on their fault, but they were trying to find something that wasn't there. You know what I mean? And so they said, well, what would you do differently next time on this film? You know, because it is stressful in the way you work. He's like, I would go with less of a plan next time, even less of one, because you know, and he said, I like to work under pressure too. And, you know, I need to have that. And also I don't want to be like restrained. And obviously, you know, it could break. It could have made it for a terrible film. It may not work next time he tries this, because you could see it falling apart. But he's basically pulled this off twice now to really good results. Like it's awesome the way he works.
What makes it even more awesome is that's exactly how the character Ethan Hunt does everything in the movie. Yeah. So it's like, so the character in the movie is really based on how Tom Cruise is.
Well, they also said, you know, Tom Cruise also pushes him, you know what I mean? And everybody else. And they said basically Benji, Simon Pegg's character, is almost like Christian McQuarrie, where Tom Cruise is forcing him into these positions where he has to make something work and has to do it, and he just has to do it. I remember somebody tweeted him that, and he just put ...
You know, and one thing else I really like about these movies is like, just like one of the podcasts I listen to is a guy who works in film, and he's done a couple of Tom Cruise movies, and he's saying like, if you work with Tom Cruise, like, he takes everybody out to lunch, like from the top people to the people cleaning the set. Like everybody, every day. It's like, it's apparently a really good working situation with him. So I think when you hear all that stuff too, it makes these movies even better, because you know, like, very seldom have you ever heard anything negative as far as him like working with people.
I don't relationship stuff.
I don't think you ever. Yeah, the relationship stuff is one thing, but as far as like working, like you don't hear about yelling at people or like
a Christian Bale.
No Christian Bale.
Are you
anything.
a professional?
Yeah, and it's like it's just kind of cool to see like this point. This is his baby, and he's just kind of.
I told William too last time. I said these films. What I love about them is they're multi-million-dollar or $1 million plus films, but they also feel like independent films where everybody is so personally invested in making it good, and they also are flying by the seat of their pants, and they don't have unlimited budgets or unlimited time. They're always under restraints. And then they make it work because everybody wants these to be as best as they can. Yeah. It is not, I told him, it's not some writer who pitched a script and then they hire a director for it and then they hire an actor for it. Yeah. It's like everybody wants to do the best job they can on these because they all want to be making this film. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's not just a job for them. And that's what's like great about these because it does feel more special than a lot of other action films. But
yeah, I think that would be interesting if they can do if they do one more. Because really
he'll be about 60 then when that one comes out.
So it'd be kind of interesting what he's able to do, but it's just hard. You don't get a lot of movies like this anymore that are big because you don't really get $170 million movie that's like this. Because that's what this movie
superhero films are that much.
Yeah, that's what the superhero films are. So the only other thing that really exists like this is Bond. Yeah. And me personally, I'm choosing the couple last Mission Impossibles over the last Bonds.
Yeah.
They've been more enjoyable. Now, they don't make the money because Bond just has the bigger name and has a little more cachet.
But I think worldwide gross are pretty close. No, recent ones.
It's like the last couple Bonds have, I think, like Spectre still broke like 700 million or something.
Oh. And Spectre was not.
And Spectre was not great, but it carries that name, so that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And two, again, about being personally invested, Daniel Craig does amazing in those, but he's been like, I'm done with Bond. And then they brought him back for like Spectre or whatever. And now he's like, I'm done. And now they're talking about him coming back again. Like,
whereas, like,
it seems like somebody who doesn't want to be there, but the paycheck's big enough, and it's just.
Well, I will say, like, you hear a lot of these superhero movies and stuff, like, it is hard on those guys to stay in that shape that they have to all the time and do all that stuff. But it does seem like Tom Cruise, like, thrives in this and that's what he likes doing. And
Christopher McQuarrie, he actually didn't want to do another one because he didn't expect to as well. Like he said on the one before, they were shooting one of the scenes, maybe the airplane scene on Rogue Nation, and he was sitting there and looked over to somebody. He said, "Man, I feel sorry for the next son of a bitch that's got to make the sequel to this movie." And he said, "I was eating my own words."
Okay,
and Tom Cruise basically convinced him to do it again.
So Spectre made about $200 million more than the last Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it just carries the Bond name. That Bond name is going to get you a guaranteed at worst.
It's a 50+ year franchise.
Yeah, you're going to get $300 million.
It guarantees you're going to make $500 million worldwide, and then
every time,
and then you can definitely make more than that. So, is there anything else?
No, not really. We can go on to the movie.
All right.
I'm caught up with Sharp Objects. Really like that show.
Yeah, I still need to watch. I need to get HBO again.
Still enjoying it. So,
but we can move into discussing RoboCop, the 1987 Paul Verhoeven movie that as we touched on at the beginning of the episode. We talked about it like it's this weird mixture because it's a hyper violent. We'll do full spoilers throughout because it's RoboCop. I'm sure everybody's seen it. It is a ultra violent satirical action movie. So what's funny is this movie went to the MPAA for multiple iterations, like a ton of times, because it was rated X for the longest while, and then they eventually got it from rated X to rated R. And apparently some of the commercials they inserted that were kind of satirical commercials were, once they started getting the X ratings, they wanted to insert something to lighten the tone. So they put the commercials in there to kind of break up some of the ultra violence. And then some of those commercials, what's funny to watch those now, it's like the game with like the family and it's like the nuclear weapon game.
Yeah, nuke 'em.
And it's like, oh, Pakistan, it's like all these things. It's like, this is so relevant now.
Yeah.
And then there's like the different TV shows, like how about that for $1 that's running gag throughout the movie. And then they have the commercial for the 6000 SUX, which sucks. But the movie has all these touches, and then it went from like rated X to eventually getting rated R. And then they cast these people in villain roles who traditionally were not those types of roles, because I'm trying to remember. I definitely saw this movie first, but then I had not watched it for a few years when I started watching that 70s show as a kid, and Kurtwood Smith is Red. And then it's funny to go back and watch him as Clarence Boddicker, and then you're like, well, he makes a good villain.
Yeah.
And then like Ronnie Cox, all these different people that, Miguel Ferrer is awesome in this.
Ray Wise.
Ray Wise. I mean, it's just got a ton
Andrew Packard from Twin Peaks. I can't remember his name. The owner of, oh my God, why am I blanking on the name from from Halloween 3? What is the name of the mask company?
The Irish guy.
What is the name of the mask company?
Silver Shamrock.
Yeah, so the president of Silver Shamrock. So apparently when they were wanting to get this film made, they were sitting around the script and no American directors wanted to touch it because...
It's Dan Hurley.
Okay.
Dan O'Hurley.
Because, of course, the script's called RoboCop, so they're like, oh, this is like this dumbest name, and that it's a robot cop. Like it sounds cheesy. And then so they couldn't get any American filmmakers to touch it, and apparently Paul Verhoeven, it got passed to him, and even he was like, nah. And his wife apparently
read the script,
started reading it, and was like, no, you need to take a look at this again. So thankfully, she actually read it and looked at it, and I guess he was like, okay, there's a little bit something more here than just a dumb action film. And I don't know how much that first script reflected the film we got.
Yeah.
Didn't it say like the screenwriter got the concept for RoboCop by seeing the poster for Blade Runner, and it was about a cop who hunts cyborgs. Like, let's make a cyborg cop. Yeah. And then they had like different iterations, and then they had a version that was like a script more like that, and then there was another one about a robot cop. So they combined the script with somebody else's their ideas, and then ended up with what was RoboCop. And also that ended up taking ideas from kind of Dread, the comic version.
Yeah.
Which you can kind of see some similarities there. And
especially RoboCop being essentially judge, jury, and executioner. He just kills indiscriminately almost if somebody has broken the law.
And what's funny is like reading the reactions to this movie. I mean, granted, we're talking about now in 2018 when the movie came out in 87, but there were people who thought, two different camps. There were people who thought the movie was like far right-wing conservative fascism in support of a, all omnipotent, killing machine that is judge, jury, executioner, and can't be destroyed. And people who thought that was like this far right, conservative ideal. And then you had people that thought it was like this ultra liberal story tied up in these tropes of extreme violence and generally like more conservative action ideas. So they thought it was like this ultra liberal anti-capitalist idea wrapped in the trappings of a fascist pro. So you have like these views of this movie is completely opposite.
I definitely think it is critical of militarization and privatization of police forces, obviously. You know what I mean? Because they are essentially the bad guys in it.
And there's so much more relevant now with drones being used in military applications and killing millions of people.
The militarization of police now as well.
Privatization.
But also too, the end of the film, not to skip ahead, but like, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the company.
OCP?
Yeah, OCP. It's not like OCP is like over with or anything. Like, no, just, one of the head guys is taken out. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like this company is done. It's, it is a personal story about Murphy and his kind of journey and his like kind of revenge and getting back his humanity in some regards. Apparently too, Verhoeven was very interested in biblical studies.
Yeah.
I'd heard some people say that he had a degree in it, but apparently he didn't have a degree in biblical studies. But this was also like an American Jesus to him because he was somebody who died, and was essentially came back.
Yeah.
And a little bit, Frankenstein was also a favorite story of his. And it was a little bit like Frankenstein because he was like put back together essentially or built from other parts and then basically turned on by people. You know what I mean? Like the police force and stuff like that. So I think supposedly the biblical references drew him to this as well, seeing him as like an American Jesus, which is funny. He's a Dutch filmmaker that, the American version of the Jesus kills people. It's like...
with the gun.
Yes. Yeah. And apparently he grew up too around like some German V1 and V2 rocket facilities, I think in the Netherlands. And during World War II, and it was always getting bombed and stuff. So he has like a more cynical view of probably the world than you know, some American filmmakers that grew up, you know, in the 50s or 60s, and you know, everything. Even if they grew up in World War II here, you know, they weren't getting bombed next door to their house.
They had a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, so it's definitely a specific point of view and like cynicism, I think, but also, you know, smartly points out a lot of things about our culture.
But if you just said RoboCop, I think most people think like Roger Corman. Like that's what this sounds like.
Exactly.
You know, a cop that gets killed, Roger Corman. But this is as far as, and there is some nudity in this, but it's not.
Well, like, so, I guess too, we never said, so the basic synopsis, in case you weren't aware of RoboCop, in a dystopic and crime-ridden Detroit, a terminally wounded cop returns to the force as a powerful cyborg haunted by submerged memories. That's from IMDb. But like, yes, you're saying like, you know, the movie at the very, very beginning in the police locker room shows one woman topless and a couple of bare asses of men. But it's in the context of a locker room. People are changing. The only thing is it's like co-ed locker room. And then Verhoeven does that again in Starship Troopers. Yeah. So I guess he has like this thing. Maybe it's a European thing where that's more in line
you know, it's just a normal thing.
In the U.S.,
it's unsexualized. So
have you read the op-ed or the whatever that Mike Pence wrote years ago about the movie Mulan?
No. Oh, I think I'd heard about it.
So basically, his takeaway was men and women in the military together, or women in the military, bad idea, because men can't control themselves and there's going to be sexual assault. So it's our fault for not. So I think that like maybe Verhoeven comes from an idealized society where co-ed locker rooms wouldn't lead to a bunch of harassment and assaults. Very, very small element. Just like the very beginning of the movie, there's that. I don't think there was any nudity throughout the rest.
I think at the club maybe there's somebody.
When the guy says I buy that for $1, he's got like a bunch of money in his hands and there's like some naked girls around him.
Okay, well, I was trying to remember just like
but this movie just is not a ton of nudity.
So you brought up maybe doing Showgirls, and that's why I was like, oh well, let's, you know, what about something more genre heavy? And we talked about RoboCop.
Yeah,
and I watched Showgirls probably like a month ago or so.
I only remember that because there was that honest trailers for it. And it's like, oh yeah, that movie was so bad.
Yeah. Well, and when I was watching it too, I actually think there's redeeming qualities of it. I kind of enjoyed it on some weird level. But in that film too, the nudity almost is on some level unsexualized.
It's so over the top. And
too, it's normal. I think it's normalized. You know, they are showgirls.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just like, oh, this is just their job. They're in the dressing room. You know what I mean? They're working. Yeah. And that almost made me feel like the same thing as the locker room scene in this, because it is their work. You know, it is essentially their dressing room.
Well, everybody's acting casual about it. And they don't come back to it again.
Obviously, Showgirls has some sexualized scenes for sure, but almost over the top. You know what I mean? It's not, that's not, he's obviously not trying to be sexy in that scene. Yeah. Like, you know, he does this weird over the top, I don't know, you know, like the humor in it it's so over the top that it makes it humorous.
It's almost like I have an Austin Powers movie.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It's just
because you have like, you know, RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers, you know, like Showgirls or whatever. Basic Instinct. So, you know, Basic Instinct is like a very seminal thriller film from that era. But then you have like his other stuff like Starship Troopers and RoboCop. Like Starship Troopers, I think more overtly because of the more like in your face ads that come up about join the military.
Yeah.
But like RoboCop, like it has the nudity is just kind of a small element of it that just kind of, because I was talking about this last night with Julia. It's like, you know, I watched this as a kid, like a pretty young kid. I'm pretty sure I watched the R-rated version just because I think the way American society is extreme violence. It's okay for kids to see. Just don't let them see some boobs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's kind of like this weird.
Now it's way different though, because there's parents that are like, none of that, you know.
But then with like RoboCop, you know, the nudity at the beginning is so like, you know, he said like normalized and unsexualized that you don't really notice it.
Yeah. It's not like at the beginning of Carrie.
Because I know people now who won't let their kids watch PG-13 stuff till they're 13. Yeah. And then they even kind of monitor like on Netflix and Hulu. They watch the shows from beginning to end before they let their kids watch them. And it's like back in the day, we were just watching Predator and RoboCop when we were 8. So
yeah,
I saw Arnie last night. I was having a conversation with him and he was talking about, I don't know if it's somebody, he was listening to something or reading something about somebody who worked on Sesame Street. And they were saying like FCC had to go through and like basically, you know, with a fine tooth comb, everything they put on the air for Sesame Street. But all these kids watch stuff on YouTube and that is just a Wild West. Yeah. You know, and then especially too when YouTube videos these people like the conspiracy theorists or maybe certain like far-leaning political views will start seemingly tagging their videos the same thing, so they'll come up in search results or autoplay videos and unboxing videos. You know what I mean?
There's a video that is 20 minutes of Lightning McQueen jumping ramps over Spider-Man, and just weird garbage like that. It just has like this kind of looped, like really generic music, or like the Kids Bop version of something.
Yeah.
So you have videos like that have 20 million views, so people have made money off those because kids sit there and just watch the entire 20 minutes. And then like the next video, something kind of like that. Then the next video is anti-Semitic conspiracy theory video, or one where the Joker starts slapping bikini wearing girls on their butts or something. So you have all these weird things that kids watch. And it's like, what's worse for a kid to watch? The, original like 87 RoboCop or some of this weird YouTube stuff?
It's radicalizing our youth.
Well, it's just like I think a lot of the YouTube videos, like it's just colors and lights and things, and it's just mush. There's no content whatsoever. Yeah. At least with RoboCop, like there's things happening, and you're identifying like so something in this movie, like Miguel Ferrer was perfect for his part in that he's the business person that sees like a coworker. Because what's funny is they were showing like the Ed 209 prototype at the board meeting, like the main guy Dick was trying to do is Dick Jones was trying to do is his like robot drone policeman, and then it accidentally kills the coworker,
which is so good
because he picks up the gun. It's like put the gun down. He puts it down. It's like put the gun down. And everybody's freaking
especially
out.
too. Automatic technology was not really a thing back then, and now it's like you're so used to Siri or Alexa, and it just doesn't works like maybe like 7 times out of 10, but it's things aren't flawless right
or
now.
like I also have an accent, I guess. I don't hear it, but I have one. So if I use like hey Siri and I say something like set a timer for blah blah blah, I'm like alarm set no, I don't want an alarm, I want a timer. So
you're trying to get like Siri to do something
or
and then
directions, and it does something completely different.
You tell it to set an alarm for a certain time, and you look at it and it looked up search results for something.
Like
but so you have the idea that they're showing this prototype. And apparently a difference in the X-rated or unrated cut versus the R-rated cut. It shows a lot more of him getting shot when he's on the prototype and blood squirting out and stuff. So
there's a lot.
The Ed 209 like shoots the guy and kills him. He's on the table, and somebody's like, "Get the paramedics! Somebody call the paramedics!" And then they're like, "Don't touch him." But Miguel Ferrer's character immediately jumps into, "This is opportunity for me to push my program now," and then he jumps on it. And his colleague dying doesn't faze him at all.
I think he even came up in the room with him too.
Yeah, he's all about jumping straight to, pitching his idea. When he gets the go ahead, he's like, "That's how you join the big leagues," and he's all about capitalism. And then you have the scene where Murphy and his partner Lewis go and they come upon Boddicker and his crew.
And so apparently too, there's some things mentioned, but Murphy was transferred specifically because they said that we've got this RoboCop thing.
He's from the nice part of town.
We need some candidates or whatever. So I believe he was transferred and sent to the bad part of town, hoping that we'll get a candidate soon for the RoboCop project. So basically it was like almost set up. Knowing the result.
And then you have the element of like him having the kid, and he wants to impress the kid, so he does like the gun flip thing,
which I love. Yeah,
because that gives an element that then makes it make sense that Lewis would recognize that and be like, hey, so you have the like
him bringing back his humanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
His memories. It's just as the film progresses, you can tell he's becoming more human.
Because you have him. So when him and Murphy and Lewis go and they follow them to the abandoned place that's their like hideout, and they sneak in, and then you have the part where he gets to jump on the one guy, but then other people come in with shotguns and they blow his hand off, and then they blow his arm off, and then shoot him like 1,000 times with shotguns. And then the X-rated version, like there's more of that. So apparently in the R-rated version, it doesn't show like his arm getting blown off. It just shows it already off. So the X-rated or the unrated cut shows his arm getting shot off, and you see more blood around that. And then you see the prosthetic from when he gets shot in the head. And like honestly, even though you can tell that's a prosthetic right before he gets shot, I still think that looks way better than CGI blood splatter or current things, because there's a tangible element to it, and they kind of uncount. Like maybe somebody would kind of look like that when they're getting shot up. So it's just all these elements. And two, like the special effects for this were from was it Rob Bottin who worked on The Thing for a lot of it. So there's a lot of things in it that look amazing.
The violence is so brutal. Like, you know,
so over the top.
Have you, like, really, like, the new Dread is pretty brutal, but it's like there are not many films even modern day that are this just so brutal watching people get shot up. You know what I mean?
Like, even when Red Foreman gets hit with the car at the end, when he gets like dunked in the like that waist stuff.
Oh, that's the other guy though.
Yeah.
It's not Red Foreman, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it's his buddy. Yeah, and he just hit, he just blows up all over the car, and all of his chunks are flying everywhere.
And
like,
it looked disgusting, and it worked because the way they cut it was just so that you didn't see enough of it for it to look fake. You just see him like, and then get exploded.
Hit the Atomic Avenger looking guy get blown up all over the car. And
so
he's what I want all the X-Men to look like.
Yeah.
so you have the element, you know, like we said, like when you hear the name RoboCop, you think like Roger Corman.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And then I think when the trailer got announced for this, people thought, oh, this is a joke. And they saw it, it's like, oh shit, this looks hyper violent. I need to see this. And apparently too, like Verhoeven had worked before with Rutger Hauer. So he was originally one of the people they wanted for RoboCop, but they realized the suit needed somebody that was thin. So that's why Peter Weller got the nod, because, you know, he's a decent actor and was thin enough to fit in the suit and maneuver it. And I think they said he was losing like multiple pounds a day from just how hot the suit got.
Yeah, they said it took a long time to put on, and then they had to work it out. So that gave him time to like figure out the robotic movement.
Well, I think they said they had to stop shooting for 3 days while he worked with people to figure out how to make the suit work in a realistic way, because everything they kind of thought about wasn't possible with the way the suit actually worked.
And Orion picked this film up because they needed another hit like Terminator. And Schwarzenegger, I guess, was also a possible candidate. But again, he was way too big for the suit.
The RoboCop would have been 12 foot tall.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you had like, you know, these elements of, so after Murphy gets, you know, seemingly killed, he's, you know, I guess just enough left of him that they can put him in the RoboCop. And you see the scenes from his perspective as they're working on him. And then Miguel Ferrer comes in and they're like, what about the arm? He's like, we'll lose the arm. We need to all be robotic. And they're like, but really? And he's like, well, he signed the contract when he started working here. He's product now, so take the arm.
Yeah. And
it's just funny because there's a lot of for-profit companies now that I think operate in that exact way of employees or whatever. They're at a certain point, their product.
You would think almost now he would be working for Amazon or something.
Yeah. Well, because like when you see these pitches for like alternate reality or smartphones or wearable tech, the way some Silicon Valley executives talk about their technology sounds like how he talks about, you know, Murphy and RoboCop.
Yes.
And it's just funny. This movie was so, you know, ahead of its time in the way that this stuff was all. I mean, people think the movie.
I mean, much like, you know, Blade Runner and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's.
But I think this was
incredible.
Close.
Exactly. Yeah.
This was closer to corporate culture now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
Well, you said you go watch. It's funny because this is one of those movies that it's one of the rare movies that actually aged better. Like when you watched it in the 80s, some, like you said, there was some of that stuff that just seemed outlandish, but now like having Alexa, Siri, and all this stuff, you go back and watch it, and it's like, this makes more sense now than probably it did
and two, you know, Detroit was not what it was. You know what I mean? Like that's another thing too. It almost like predicted in some regards. I think they said, you know, basically it was set there because it was
urban decay.
The ideal of, you know, the perfect ideal of industrial capitalism with, you know, the motor capital of the U.S.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, things weren't going down a lot, there was more competition then with foreign automakers, but still it wasn't, you know, as in trouble as it is now.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just, there's so many things and they put a lot of thought into a lot of this, and things just happened. Some things panned out because of that, because there was so much detail, and it wasn't just, we set it just in New York or just some random city.
Oh, and then apparently the guy, Jamie Hyneman from Mythbusters, worked on some of the special effects in some regard.
It's kind of awesome.
But yeah, there's just a whole lot of, because Rob Bottin was special on makeup, special effects and stuff. So there's, you know,
I think if he did the suit, I think I remember.
I don't know if he did the suit, but I know that he
did the suit. Apparently, I know it was Verhoeven or maybe Rob one. They said like they worked so hard on it, getting it right, and argued so much. By the time it was done, they didn't even talk anymore. Yeah. You know, because they were, you know, passionate about making this look right. And this suit is so kick ass.
Yeah, it looks great. And then the way they did it, it doesn't like it holds up. Because in this movie, you have the kind of stop motion Ed 209, and you watch it now, you can definitely tell what's green screened, and you can tell when it's walking through the office that it's a miniature office.
I was seeing people saying back then it looked terrible, but I almost like, you know, it. For me, it adds to the.
There's some charm.
Well, and it's also the movie's made on a $13 million budget in the 80s. So back then, if you were to adjust that for inflation, it's still not a huge budget. It's still probably like if you adjust it for inflation under 60.
I don't want to say surreal, but it adds to the over the top feel of the film. You know what I mean? It's just like over the top violence, stylized stop motion. Like I think it just works in this context because it's not trying to be this
photorealistic,
hyper realistic, you know, like realistic setting. It's not. You're transported to this world in a specific place. Granted, it's in the future, but I think it all works for me.
But that holds up way better than crappy CG from the 2000s, early 2000s,
or even the 90s. Something else we need to talk about is the fact that they all drove tourist shows.
Or SHOs.
Yeah, SHOs. And I just love that was the vehicle of the future.
Well, because at the time, the Ford Taurus was a futuristic vehicle. And that's why they went with it, because it looked more futuristic than a lot of your like Chrysler K cars or Chevy Caprices or whatever of the time. And it did look more futuristic than like the contemporary cop cars of like the Ford Crown Victorias and stuff. So, you know, it's just funny seeing like what was futuristic back in the 80s. But then, you know, so once Murphy is RoboCop, you have the elements of like he has like the dreams or whatever, like little splices of memories in there. But he goes on the job and goes out and is immediately successful and, you know, stops the robbery, stops the rape. And then you have the moment where he saves the girl from getting sexually assaulted by the two guys. And he's able to use the targeting system to determine like where her dress and legs would be and where the guy's crotch would be. So he shoots him right in the dick. And then the other guy like throws down his knife. He's like, man, I don't want to. So then the girl runs over and is like thanking him and hugging him. He's like, you've experienced trauma. I can contact a rape crisis center.
Again, it's the very robotic and like lacking any humanity or compassion. You know what I mean? Like he was doing the job, but that's all he knows how to do. Contacts the rape crisis center. You know what I mean? Like there's no like consoling or anything. Like at this point, he is like fresh, you know, freshly back from the dead and is just all robot essentially.
And it's funny.
And I guess the thought process was that if they used a real human, that would take less time for programming and stuff because they would use their former skills on some level, you know, so they went to build an AI from scratch.
Well, I think the idea was
a shortcut, right?
I think it was to maybe utilize the fact like a human controlling it with their emotion and empathy versus a robot that would, I don't know exactly what the thought process was, but it was just to say, let's take a living person and turn them into the machine versus trying to program an entire consciousness into the machine.
This story, aside from being like a story kind of, you know, like resurrection with Jesus or Frankenstein, it's also almost like a superhero story where that something happens to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And essentially they're reborn as a superhero
and have to regain their humanity.
Powers or, you know, or like a trauma, some of the trauma, you know, like Batman or whatever, losing his parents and then, you know, falling into Batcave or whatever, and then becoming Batman, you know, and it's like, how does the character deal with that? But in this case, normally like Spider-Man or something like that, they're given these powers and then it's how does this person deal with these powers? Are they going to do it for good, bad? What's their moral stance? RoboCop, though, it's different because he doesn't have a moral choice. And it is the thing about, you know, Blade Runner and a lot of androids, like what it means to be human, what it means to have choices. And his character does not have choices when he starts out. So it's like all about that journey of slowly kind of regaining his humanity. And as the film goes too, you see more of his face as his humanity comes back. Because first you see his eye, then he takes off his helmet all the way and he basically, you know, Murphy mostly.
Well, and two, you also have the elements in it where you know, he has the directive 4 that's like classified, and the directive is that he can't, you know, arrest or harm any executive members or leadership of OCP. And the funny thing is, like, I seriously believe that if like there was a autonomous RoboCop drone type thing implemented today, that would be part of the programming.
Absolutely.
And that like do not arrest board members or whatever, because like, you know, companies like Google or Facebook, like, so Facebook, the amount of information and dirt they have on people because they have all the messenger stuff, like they could probably ruin people. They could ruin tons of marriages and friendships and business situations. Yeah. Like, but I'm pretty sure that they make sure that their messages aren't able to be logged in that way. Or they
probably, yeah.
So, you know, it's just one of those things where this is all stuff in the movie in the 80s before a lot of the technology and internet stuff exists the way it does now, but it very much has things that I think will be the case today.
And also, too, even if you don't look at it from a technology perspective, if private companies have that much stake in, you know, the police force, that is the sway they could have. You know what I mean? Like the police force, you know, granted they're talking about striking stuff. They are, you know, mostly very good and on the up and up. You know, they have
they weren't shown as being corrupt.
They have their issues, but you know, in a lot of films, the police, there might be corrupt police officers. That's how it is in a lot of films when you realize, oh, the police officers are really, it's the, you know, the one detective or the chief is actually working with the bad guys or whatever. I like that this film didn't have to take it that far, and at least it was like, there's a blanket goodness. You know, there's like the special police team that shoots him down, but even the other ones are like, no, we can't. He's a cop. You know?
Well, and two, you have like when he captures some of the members of Bonaker's gang and brings them in. You see that, like, you know, oh, so this big corporate entity, this corporate bigwig is working with organized crime to help his business imperatives. And I'm pretty sure that happens in real life, where maybe not as direct as this movie where there's an executive who's giving money, but you know, when you see a lot of liquor stores pop up in low-income neighborhoods and a lot of like check cashing places, because we were going to Chicago a while back. We went through some town in Indiana that the only things there, the nicest building in the entire town was check cashing places, the 24-hour check cashing places, a strip club, and the churches. So in this little town, destroyed economy, nothing there, overgrown everything, houses falling apart. The only things that looked nice, because it looked like, I was like, you know, I've never been to Iraq or in war or whatever, but the pictures I've seen of like Fallujah and stuff, this looks like that. This looks like a war-torn county or whatever, or, you know, country. The nicest buildings were the 24-hour check cashing places, strip clubs, and churches.
Which is even, I mean, you see, you not even
do they have a subway there?
I didn't see any.
Normally small towns, if they have something, they have a subway.
I didn't see any fast food really until we got out to the next town and it was a little bit nicer, but so it's just like I could see companies, you know, and there's the whole gentrification thing.
Yes,
because in the movie, OCP is wanting to build like this new mega city that was going to bring in, you know, millions of workers and all kinds of money. And they even pointed out, you know, with all these workers coming in, there's going to be a need for prostitution, for drugs. So
they don't want the crime to go totally away because they profit off of it as well.
They just want it controlled.
Even Ed 209, they're like, we don't care if it doesn't work. We're going to have years of repairs
and military
being able to sell them. Yeah, being able to sell repair parts and fixing them. Like they're worried about their long-term profit goals, as most companies are.
Not the effectiveness of the product.
Yes, yeah.
And all that stuff I think works brilliantly and just is so spot on with how today is, because you look at the military, they have like the F-35s, they've taken like billions of dollars overruns and years more than they should have.
And you know, all those contracts are coming from people that are friends with, you know what I mean? Like it's just so much of it is connected as far as like, who knows who? Okay, I'm going to give you this military contract because, you know, we're buddies and it'll help you and it'll help me.
And so then you have the element of like RoboCop does his job amazingly well, and like Miguel Ferrar's character at one point saying like, oh, and we're anticipating crime as a whole will be zero in 40 days. Yeah. It's like, but there should have been more RoboCops than it would have been, definitely. But you know, you have him effectively doing policing and just, you know, being bulletproof, stopping that entire drug trade, taking down the entire warehouse full of bad guys and henchmen and all that stuff. But then like when he goes to arrest Dick Jones is when they implement the Directive 4. It's like, well, you can't arrest me. And then they try to paint him as like rogue robot that's gone bad. And then he escapes and they send the bad guys after him and all that stuff. And that's when he's starting to, you know, have memories. And that's why he goes after Boddicker, because he remembers him as killing him. And then you have him kind of regaining his humanity slowly.
Going back to his house, that's a great scene too. When he's the score in this movie is really good. Like it's really good there. It's orchestral, you know, like the theme is so awesome.
Because I think that having the orchestral score in it and stuff works way better than having like a more synth-heavy score.
Especially that emotional scene. You know what I mean? Like that, yeah.
Well, it's just funny, just again, like this movie just got a lot more depth through it than you would think. Just
and it's a brisk movie too.
Yeah, it's very.
It's not like 2.5 hours or something.
And like he asked his former partner Lewis, because the one thing in the movie is not super clear how much time transpires, but you see there's passage of months because it's like they're celebrating New Year's and stuff with RoboCop when he's still like being worked on.
Before Murphy is dead, though, I think when he pitches it, he said I can have like a prototype.
90 days.
Was it 90 days?
Yeah,
or 9 months?
Like
okay, 90 days. Okay.
So you don't. It's not super clear, but like he asked his partner, because you know it isn't clear how long he was RoboCop. Like in those like him as being RoboCop, like how long was he on the streets? Like, but Lewis tells him like his wife, after he died, they moved and started over somewhere. So you have like a really sad element to it of like knowing that they're out there, but I'm a robot. So not much can happen there. And two, at that point, would it be worse for him to let them know that he's alive but a robot, or just to go about his business? But, so there's the element to him, like, that was taken from him and he can't get it back. And he can at least get revenge on the people that did it to him and take down, everybody. But two, something's funny is if this was in the internet era and he was cloud connected, he could have immediately uploaded the recordings of like Boddicker saying, I work for Dick Jones. And Dick Jones.
Yeah.
So he could have immediately but then they could have also probably remotely shut him down.
Yeah.
So
he would have had to take off his online so they wouldn't be able to track him.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's like all those elements.
Speaking of that, we'll talk about the sequel coming out. We'll talk about that towards the end of this.
Yeah, so then, there's all those elements, and you have him kind of regaining his, humanity, and Lewis, despite not really working with him that long, really, because it's just the beginning, her being like somebody that realizes it's him. Because like one of the best scenes in the movie is when they're at the shooting range, all the cops are shooting, and then you hear brrr, and then you see the cops slowly realizing and like stopping and looking. And then it's like you watch him and he's like shot each target perfectly at every distance.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that'd be so awesome to see in real life.
And then Nancy Allen helps him retrain because his calibration's off.
Yeah.
So he like compensates for it.
And two, there were some people at the time that said the movie was like anti-feminist or whatever because women were just background objects or whatever. But it's like, well, they wrote the character of his partner as kind of gender neutral. Mm-hmm. And that's why they had her with like shorter hair. And then the opening scene, like theoretically, until she takes her helmet off after beating down the perp, you don't know that she's female.
But she really gets the first action scene. It's a small one, but she gets the first action on the screen in this film.
So, like she's like a moral center and like a good cop and, helps out and all this stuff. So you have her in there being female really has nothing to do with it. That character could have easily been a male partner and it would not have changed anything. Because from the very beginning, he mentions his son. So there's like no romantic tension whatsoever. And it's just more like, oh, you're my partner and you're a decent guy.
It's like, the nudity and the plate. It's like, okay, this is just our work. You know what I mean? There's there's no sexual tension or anything like that, which is great. It's just leave it at the door. If it's not this story, you don't have to put it in just to put it in.
And, you have all those elements, but then like the revenge elements of it. So when you get to the third act, when they're at the abandoned factory, and Boddicker and his group goes with their like big bazooka 50 cal rifles or whatever to take out RoboCop. That's when like the revenge element kicks in.
Yes, yeah.
And it's just so super satisfying.
Yes.
Yeah.
All these people that have done these things to him. So I forget what the guy's name was, but the guy that turns into goop, like he deserved that full on. He gets a terrible, disgusting death. Some of the other like minor henchmen don't get, as noticeable a death. They just kind of get shot or whatever. But then like Ray Wise gets his ass blown up.
Yeah.
And then it's also too when RoboCop goes to the club and just beats the shit out of him and pulls around by his hair.
Yeah, that's a great little Ray Wise scene.
And then when he beat the shit out of Boddicker at the cocaine factory or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that was super satisfying too.
The cocaine factory shootout's really good too. I like that a lot. It's it doesn't have to be fast paced. RoboCop's not a fast paced machine. But it's
like Jason or something.
It's like it's well like scripted and just set, and you always know what's going on, where he's shooting at, but it's still like satisfying and fun. It's like operates like RoboCop operates very deliberately.
And it's one of those movies because like I was reading something the other day where Donnie Yen, who was in Rogue One, was talking about why Star Wars hasn't caught on in China, and it's mostly just because they didn't have those movies originally because they didn't get a lot of Western cinema then. And trying to reintroduce Chinese audiences to a movie from 1977 today, they thought that Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher were ugly and short. They thought that the lightsaber battles were pathetic and not high-octane fights. Yeah. And just couldn't get into it, so they had no connections to the new ones. Like the Marvel movies, the oldest one is 2008, so it's still modern. So they can kind of connect to that. So a lot of movies from like the 70s and 80s. I mean, if you compare like a lot of the Chinese action films, they're going to be pretty comparable to Star Wars at the time.
Man, you go watching Bruce Lee stuff, Jackie Chan stuff from the 70s and 80s.
Way more
There's no comparison because Star Wars is like, you got an old man with a beer gut fighting another old man beer gut, and it's like, but you go watch Jackie Chan, they're fighting swords, breaking boards, doing the splits. There's no comparison.
The point was, if you showed people the movie in the 70s, it was mind blowing because of all the technology and all that stuff.
Yes, okay.
It's just trying to show it the context, and now it's like, oh, this is boring, and I can't really accepting these shortcomings. as opposed to RoboCop. If you show that to an audience today, it holds up. I mean, the gore is there, the shooting's there. The pacing isn't off. It's not super slow. I mean, like I said, I think the effects hold up better than mediocre CGI.
Stop motion would turn off some people, and also whenever I can't think of his name, but Andrew Packard gets shot out of the window.
Yeah,
he has like very long arms. Like,
well, it's like CG, or it's like a claymation.
Yeah. It's like that. That really, I mean, other than that, pretty solid looking film. I think there's like some great matte paintings. So they shot it in Dallas. Yeah, except for that oil refinery that was like in Pittsburgh, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Like some of the, you can tell where they're doing like the mattes for the green screen. So like I know you said before, like there was somebody you're aware of that like only wanted to watch movies that were made within like a certain like past 10 years.
Yeah.
So if somebody has that mindset and they can't get over it, I mean that's their loss.
Yes,
but all of the gore and all those effects look so good that all holds up. It's only just like the Ed 209 at the stuff towards the end, that looks great. You can't really tell on that when it's like the outdoor stuff and towards the end. It's only that beginning one that's a little bit more like, oh, it's a model and a miniature.
But it's great details and all that. Like when it falls over, like I love all the details, the screens.
Yeah.
Like Ed 209 is awesome.
When it falls down the stairs because it's like
it's like they didn't think about that, which is, you know, not surprising, but like they're so worried about the guns and everything else.
Well, it's like,
it needs to be able to go downstairs.
There's like those security robots they put in malls now, and there's ones that have fallen into like the water.
They just drove into the water. They keep killing themselves.
So it's just
they get something working just well enough to they can sell it. You know.
Yeah, but then they don't think about didn't one of them run over a kid? Yeah. And one of them like drove into the water.
They don't stress test them for all possible scenarios. Like they said, you know, the Dick Jones character, he's like, we only wanted to sell it. We didn't care if it worked.
Yeah.
So you have that element, but then you have the RoboCop. But then too, like when Boddicker shows up at Miguel Ferrar's house, he's like, "Bitches leave," and then blows him up. Like it's sad because Ferrar was an unintentional good guy. Like he had not great motivations, but was the reason your hero is there.
Yeah.
So you have him being just completely motivated by self-interest and looking for a promotion and power and money, and he's doing cocaine off of some girls' boobs and all that. So he's not a bad guy per se. He's just pure capitalism.
Yeah. Which, you could argue that maybe that's a bad guy if it's pure capitalism.
Yeah. But the thing that makes that more morally gray is there are a lot of people like that in real life.
Yeah.
So you have all these elements, these characters. So he's somebody that's just about his own self-gain and being successful and beating and winning. And then like the bathroom scene with him and Dick Jones where he's talking trash about him and he comes out. And he's like the only one that stays in the bathroom and doesn't scurry out, and they like have their back and forth that essentially seals his fate because then he sends the crime boss to kill him. So you have all these elements that are really awesome and still relevant today. Like you could do like an entire film class on this probably and about like how it ties into modern society.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But then like I said, so you have all those elements peppered in, but it's also just a solid ass action movie with like a third act revenge story where he just all of Boddicker's gang gets what they deserve. They get blown up, they get turned to goop. And then Boddicker gets stabbed in the neck with his R2D2 communications thingy, and that's another thing where the X-rated or unrated version has Boddicker like spraying blood out of his neck as he dies, and the original version didn't show that; just showed him come falling over. And then one of my other favorite things when he goes to the board meeting. So after he kills the Ed 209s with their rocket launcher guns, just kind of quickly dispatches them, and he has the helmet off so you can see his face and stuff. He goes in. And then he pops out his little data connector and it has blood all over it, and he just puts it in and nobody flinches.
Like, why does that have blood on it?
And then it shows Dick Jones like, yeah, I killed Bob.
Yeah.
And then he takes the CEO like hostage, and then the CEO's like, you're fired. And he's like, thank you.
And then he says, what's your name? And he says Murphy instead of RoboCop.
Yeah. So you have this super satisfying conclusion. I mean, it's still a sad movie because he doesn't get to see his family or whatever, but you have this, he takes out everyone responsible for it from top to bottom, even though the company was complicit and, whatever. And
they still exist, and he's probably still going to be used as a product.
But the ending is he's going to then go on to be the RoboCop with more autonomy or more humanity. And I think that probably makes a better solution, though, because he's not going to just, maybe when the next time he saves someone from rape, he would be, more human.
Yes. But, more compassionate.
But, you have this ending. So, all that was great. And then, too, the thing you mentioned briefly is like the sequel. that they've announced that Neil Blomkamp's going to do is going to be a sequel to this movie, not the sequels
again,
that
it's
came
like
out.
those soft reboot sequels. That's like, hey, let's probably like Halloween. Like, let's ignore all the other ones. You know.
And two, though, the thing is like RoboCop. When I was a kid, I remember 3's the one with the rocket pack. 2's the one where he gets blown up into pieces and they fix him or something. But like 2 was directed by Kirshner, who had done Empire Strikes Back. So, but the second one I don't remember being very.
No, it
doesn't stand up. And then the third one I remember being a step down from that.
And they lost
Peter
the original
Weller is not the third one, right?
No,
Yeah. Yeah, so Peter Weller is great too because I've seen him in some stuff. He was in Dexter and some other
Somebody
stuff.
said he took mime classes for this too, and I'm not for sure, but I also heard that maybe he made people refer to him as RoboCop when he had the mask on set, and then when he had it off, they could call him Murphy.
That's interesting.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, I think it is interesting though because you have movies that have really good originals, but then the sequels are lackluster.
Well,
so
Because they told such a good story.
Yeah, they
Dude,
told
the original had all that satirical and all that satire and bite in it.
Yeah.
And it's made for $13 million. I think in the theaters it made like 56 or something, and then it made a shit ton of money on rental. It made like $20-30 million on the rental
I think that's
market.
how I watched it rental.
And because back then when the VHS came out, it was $89.99. So
Damn.
the SVHS, like the lower quality one, was like $39.99. So that movie, I think the success of it is why they made sequels, not because of the story ideas. But then they brought in like Frank Miller, and they brought in people who made the best Star Wars movie, the director of the best Star Wars movie, in my opinion. But it's just, I don't know that they had the ideas there, because what are you going to do? You're just rinse and repeat like crime people. And,
I think that's where it's interesting is because Neil Blomkamp is an interesting director anyway because of his take on stuff, and
hopefully be better than Chappie, but
I think it'll be probably better than Chappie because I think everybody kind of, unless you're Christopher Nolan, you usually have a dud because it don't really seem like he's
when Chappie had elements to it that weren't terrible, and it was a movie that was enjoyable enough. If watching on Netflix, it was fine. I would not have been that happy if I had paid to go to the theater.
Did you guys watch Elysium?
I did not watch it. I need to see that.
I saw that in theaters. It was fine. I didn't hate it. Like, some people didn't like it at all. There were some, like, I thought it was okay, but also too wasn't extremely memorable. So I hope this RoboCop movie comes out. He's never hit a home run for me. Like District 9,
it was all right.
I liked the first like 2/3 of it, and then it just kind of turned into like an action video game a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is not the ending I wanted to the story.
When I saw that, I was like, this is the best video game movie I've seen. This not based on a video game.
Yeah. So I was like, I liked the more human story parts in the beginning of it, and I feel like he did. I don't know. I just hope he knows how to end this film.
Well, but really, District 9 was kind of the way that it was almost RoboCop-ish because it's like spoilers for District 9. He transforms fully into the alien, and then there's really no turning back.
Yeah.
Well, then it was basically just they'll come back and eventually do something. But but I think that the idea of ignoring the sequels, because I don't remember what happened to those anyway, and they have the TV series. I think you can pick up with the original, just that was what happened, and then like create your own adventure from there. Because I'm sure there are people whose favorite movie is part 2 or 3 RoboCop, just because when you watch it as a kid or whatever. Because people like their favorite movie is Halloween Resurrection or something with not LL Cool J. He was in Busta Rhymes with Trick or Treat and kicks him out the window. But I don't think there's anybody that's really attached to the lore of the RoboCop franchise. So I think like a visually. So if you've seen like the stuff that Blomkamp has done for Oat Studios, so Zygote and Firebase and some of those things, like he visually is doing very interesting sci-fi visuals. So I think visually he'll be a good person for it. It's just, do they have a script that makes sense and doesn't just retread the original concept?
My question is, who is going to portray RoboCop?
Based on the type of character it is, I don't see why they couldn't have Peter Weller come back if it's just a continuation.
It is, so the synopsis is basically like, hey, Detroit's in a bad place, so RoboCop the hero like returns to save it or something. Like, it is literally like RoboCop is coming back. So I don't think it's like RoboCop has been active this whole time. It's almost like he returns to the city, or who knows, out of hiding. I don't know. Or maybe he's just been deactivated for this many years. Or
they like replace him with eventual upgraded things that don't work as well. And then they decide to bring back the OG.
But you think thematically there's some more things to go, even though this one nails so much of modern day, what's happening currently. But, you would hope that they can figure out a good story that would also pay tribute to a lot of the satire and just everything that first one did. Because it's such a trend too, where it's, I don't know, I can't think off the top of my head, but you know, it happens a lot where, or even just Halloween, like we have these old franchises that everybody loves,
and you ignore the parts that you attach to. People didn't.
Well, no, they make a reboot.
Oh, okay.
That's not really like the original or good. And then they decide, oh, wait, let's just make a sequel to the original now. You know what I mean? Like we're starting to go through that process now where a lot of films have been rebooted.
Well, they tried to do it with Alien.
The reboots are ignored, and now they try to come back around to
Alien
being a
wasn't
sequel.
as much of a reboot as it was like, you know, we kind of screwed up the storyline. Nobody really liked it.
Well, the Neil Blomkamp was going to be just continuing on from Aliens, ignoring everything after it. So I think that the idea is you have a sequel, you try to relaunch it, doesn't quite take off the way you hoped. So let's just go back to the original and let's go from there. And it's an interesting trend, and it's not very often you have multiple year later sequels that turn out super well.
In this case, it'd be a 31-year later sequel.
Also, too, though, I'm not like banking this sequel even coming out, just because Blomkamp, like, he has tried on a lot of projects. You know what I mean? And
like I hope it does.
I hope it does.
I want to see it because I think that'd be like an ideal thing to readdress.
Me too. I do too. I just don't want to get my hopes up too much.
But you know, like other things too, like the video game, like Terminator versus RoboCop, that'd be a badass movie.
Yeah.
You know, the Arnold Terminator versus RoboCop or something like that would be.
When I was
really
younger,
cool.
though, I was always like Terminator would kill RoboCop.
Well, because I think what happened to Terminator was we all kind of forget that in the original Arnold Terminator is bad.
Yeah.
You know, so when you think of Terminator, I don't even think of the original Terminator. I think of T2.
In the original Terminator, he was killed by Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese, and they weren't special.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they were, but they were, you know, normal humans.
Yeah.
But yeah, so RoboCop, I guess we can give it our final scores and wrap this up. So Derek, what would you give it out of 10?
7 out of 10. You know, I mean, it's a movie that I've watched my entire life, literally, which is funny when you see these movies. He's like, you know, you've watched it your entire life. It's always really good. You can continue to rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it. It never really gets old. And it's something, too, like, if you haven't watched it in a long time, there is something a little bit special about it because you haven't watched it, so it makes it more enjoyable. But I think a lot of times we talk about, like, pacing with movies. This movie's not paced bad at all. I mean, it's paced very well because a lot of times the 80 movies feels like they're from the 80s.
It's not just all action in the third act. They have it spread throughout.
Because a lot of these movies, especially Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, like the only action was in the third act. So you had to get through a bunch of like just story crap that nobody really cared
Well, a lot
about.
of them was establishing like first act sets the character back, second act is getting back to the, you know, form, and then the third act is your big action piece.
Yeah.
That's a lot of those movies.
And this movie, while it is kind of in that narrative, there's always action all the way throughout.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's something that you could give, like you said, to most people nowadays, especially with the like the non-rated cut or whatever. And most people would enjoy this.
Yeah.
You know, just from the over the top. So I think it's a really solid 7 out of 10.
Yes. What'd you give it, Sean?
I would give it, for me, like the action also always serves the story, or you know, the gore is outlandish, and you know what I mean. It's like there's a reason for everything in this film. I think it is brisk, you know, being like over
an hour and 42 minutes.
Hour and 42 minutes. So it does what it needs to do and doesn't overstay its welcome. And I think what it does is done very well. I don't think it's a really special one. I give it like at least a 9 for me.
Yeah, I fall in the same camp. Like there's a few things that you know, because too, like when you see it as a kid, like my memory of the movie, it's a 10 out of 10. Like when I was a kid, I still give it like a 9 because I think like in terms of movies that to me dictated a lot of what science fiction was to me, or you know what sci-fi action was. So, you know, like Blade Runner, Escape from New York, RoboCop, Predator, Aliens, Alien. Like, so a lot of those movies from that era, from like the late 70s to the early 90s, it was really defined to me what, you know, Terminator, Terminator 2. A lot of those movies defined to me what, you know, sci-fi was. And I think that RoboCop, rewatching it today, it still stands up because those elements of satire and like capital, like their statements on capitalism and corporate culture, they're more relevant today than they were when it was shot. Because they actually do have drones now that kill people. So there's a lot of things just to me make it stand out even more. And it's just, you know, we talk about like the matte paintings and some of the stop motion and all that. Like if it just looked a tiny bit better, you don't need to remake it. You just show it to people now and kids would love it. As it is, I think 95% of people are okay with that. It's only that little sliver that's like, oh, it doesn't look as nice as Iron Man. So, but the suit looks amazing, and it doesn't
it's
look
all
fake.
practical. And I think that's one thing that I like about too. You look at like a lot of concepts, like the RoboCop design now. It's still cool. Like when they redid the RoboCop movie,
It was like all black,
and it's like the original was cooler. Like giving that weird blue steel look, and it.
Well, I think
I
they
love the way they
initially
light it and everything.
I think they initially wanted gray, but then they gave it more of the blue hue. Or no, maybe it was initially supposed to be blue, and they made it more gray to have a more metallic look and to not have as much glare on it from lighting and things like that.
Yeah.
So just the movie itself, like the RoboCop suit, the iconic like the sound he makes when he walks, like it still sounds good. It looks good. It doesn't look fake. It doesn't look padded for the sake of padding. It looks like a realistic design. And, you know, it's just very iconic and something that, like I said, there's the hyper violence and all this stuff in it that kind of, you know, may make a lot of people just look at the fact it was initially X-rated and all the violence, but there's all this like social commentary weaved within. And some of it's not as overt as Starship Troopers, where they're like, enlist, be a civilian, and it's more overt. This one, even though some of it's pretty
overt,
it's pretty damn on the nose, but it does, you know, it takes you, it doesn't just completely stay.
There's even like this stuff about the former presidents getting killed because of this satellite or whatever, which I think
the Star Wars
in
satellite.
Santa Barbara, it was like Reagan and somebody else. I think maybe Carter was living there at the time. But like, I think that was the era of the Star Wars program and stuff, you know, and apparently the female anchor, you know, she was supposed to be the news anchor, but she was she was on Entertainment Tonight. So basically it's like, oh, we're going to use an entertainment reporter to tell you the news. You know, like there's just so much stuff throughout. Like, even though I gave it a 9, like I was thinking like maybe a 9.5, I don't know. But like, I have no faults with this film.
Yeah.
You know,
like,
so having given it a 9, I have zero things I would change. Nothing I would change.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing I would change it. I mean, like watching it from nostalgic value, like whatever, it's a 10. Like, you know, and then the fact that it still has like meaning to it and holds up is great.
The only thing I wish we still had some of the original, because I remember having the toys from it.
Yeah.
And like you know, now NECA every now and then re-release. At one point in time, they released. I have the Predator one, but they released like the NES figures.
Yeah.
So they had NES Predator, they had NES Jason, and the NES Ninja Turtles. And they had the NES RoboCop. And it's like, I would like to get the RoboCop, but that one.
I remember having the toy that you push the button on his chest and he says different phrases. I don't remember which ones they were. I really hope it was Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me, because I love the idea of children telling each other, Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so RoboCop's amazing. It's not, I don't think it's on any streaming services, but you can buy it. I mean, it's on all of them to rent for like $2.99 or $3.99.
I also looked up, there was a documentary, because I was like, is there any docs on this? It's called a RoboDoc.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not out yet. I was looking forever. The trailer's been out for a year or two, but I was looking at RoboDoc on Amazon Prime, and it came up with this National Lampoon's RoboDoc, and it's about a doctor.
So I need to look up and see if there's any special Blu-ray editions that have a ton of special features.
So I have a Blu-ray, no special features, but the trailer. I don't know if there is, but the Criterion, I remember that being. I think that's like $70 or $80 now. That came out, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s. But when I worked at GameStop, it came in, and my friend told me, "Hey, this is rare." He bought it because it was labeled as RoboCop DVD, so it was like $6. But it's like, you know, it was like expensive then because it was out of print. But that has a bunch of special features on it, I think. But I don't know what has it. That's what I was trying to look up some stuff.
Because I remember watching. I remember what it was. There was like a TV show or something where they talked about like that movie from like conception to release and like the perception of it and the trailers and how people went from thinking it's like a satire, cheesy, like, you know, canon film to thinking, oh, this has actually got some meat on the bones.
Yeah, I really want to see more. Like, I want to see that doc when it comes out. Peter Weller apparently refused to take part, but they've got a lot of people involved in that.
Well,
so
something I like about the RoboCop design too is you could put this in like Star Wars where they have the bounty hunters.
Yeah,
and that you wouldn't blink an eye, be like, okay, that makes sense. But then you put him in Detroit, and it's like, man, okay, you know, like you buy it. So it's like if he was in Star Wars or even in Star Trek, one of those, you know, just pure sci-fi, or even in Stargate. Like,
I guess if you were to redo RoboCop in the real world, maybe you would drop a RoboCop into Chicago, and then like but the thing with Chicago, it's like a very small area where all the violence occurs and all the gun deaths. It's all just in the area where drugs are sold. I mean, it's not the entire city.
And that's tackling a social issue too, probably.
Yeah.
Or where this is more critical of the capitalist issue. You know what I mean? Where it's like these people that are well off are making more problems.
Well, the only thing is, I think that this movie is very much a product of the war on drugs in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because like I think like now you said like a lot of the problems we have now are socioeconomic issues, which not that the war on drugs didn't tackle any of that, but that was more of like the Nancy Reagan, like, just don't do drugs.
Yes, yeah.
And it's like this was more about that.
Yeah, the era of drugs are a problem. Let's use maximum force.
Yes.
And the idea of, minimum mandatory sentencing on, people get arrested for something, the minimum sentence is this, regardless of the level of offense. There's all that stuff that happened in that era that this is kind of a response to.
Yeah.
But that'll wrap up our discussion of RoboCop from 1987. And if you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor, leave a review there. That helps other people find the podcast and helps us move up the charts. We always enjoy seeing comments and feedback on YouTube because we have people that watch it there too. You can find all the stuff we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. You can find links to all of our social media accounts, so make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and all those other services. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MetaWorldDerek.
I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video